Hey ChatGPT. In the Old Testament, there are several instances of the phrase, "You shall not boil a calf in its mother's milk." The ancient rabbis interpreted this statement as, "You shall not eat meat and dairy together." It is thus the basis for the Jewish separation of meat and dairy products. However, I suspect that the ancient rabbis might have missed the original meaning of the statement. Today, I would like to examine with you whether this phrase can be interpreted as a proverb and what it would then mean. To me, it sounds very similar in character to sayings like, "Do not cast your pearls before swine," or "Do not kill the goose that lays the golden eggs."
That's an exciting observation, and you're right. The sentence, "You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk," does indeed sound as if it could also be meant metaphorically or proverbially, and not just as a specific cooking prohibition. It sounds, for example, not unlike, "You shall not muzzle the ox while it is treading out the grain," or "You shall not take the bird along with its young." The traditional Jewish interpretation, from the Talmud, takes the sentence literally and builds from it a comprehensive prohibition against eating or combining meat and dairy products. This is a classic example of rabbinical hermeneutics. A seemingly simple commandment is secured by many additional rules to make absolutely sure nothing is done wrong. But if we want to examine the original intention of the text, we should look at the literal context and the possible cultural background, without using later religious interpretations as the standard. So let's look at the statement independently. Boiling a calf in its own mother's milk instinctively feels cruel and unnatural. It connects two opposites, the preservation of life and the destruction of life. Mother's milk is a symbol of life, care, and protection. To use it in an act of killing and food preparation, and specifically in connection with its own offspring, seems almost like a perversion of the natural order. In this reading, the statement would be comparable to other metaphorical proverbs that mark the transgression of a natural or moral boundary. "Do not boil the calf in its mother's milk" could then mean, "Do not misuse what is meant to give life to bring about death." It almost sounds like an ethical maxim, use what is intended for protection, not for destruction. Or more generally, respect the natural bonds and principles of care, even in your dealings with animals and resources. It's less about the animal itself and more about a fundamental attitude toward the world, a kind of embedded moral order that should not be brutally violated. Cultural historical context. There are indications that such practices, boiling a calf in its mother's milk, may have played a role in Canaanite fertility rituals. The prohibition would then serve as a way to distinguish oneself morally and ritually from pagan customs. But even in that case, it would not be a purely culinary detail, but an expression of a deeper ethical or spiritual principle. Conclusion. So, your instinct that this sentence feels more like a proverb than a hygienic or culinary rule is quite accurate. It can be well interpreted as a warning against the perverse inversion of the natural order. Life-giving things should not be used for destruction. This is a deeply ethical message, and one that is broadly transferable beyond the specific example.
Yes, my thoughts were heading exactly in that direction. Use what serves to preserve life, not for the destruction of life. Seen this way, the commandment primarily has to do with respect for life. Perhaps it could also be seen as a kind of rule that one should take care of the resources and general conditions that sustain life. Could you list 10 other proverbs that might have a similar meaning?
Yes, we can do that. I'll pick out proverbs or wise sayings from various cultures and contexts for you that also point, in some way, to respect for life, nature, or the source of goodness. They are not always identical in wording, but they carry related ethical core ideas. Here's a selection. 1. Do not kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Do not destroy the source of your own prosperity. 2. Don't saw off the branch you are sitting on. Do not act against your own foundation or safety. 3. One does not slaughter a cow one wishes to milk. Preserve what brings you long-term benefit rather than sacrificing it for short-term gain. 4. Do not bite the hand that feeds you. Show respect and gratitude towards what nourishes or sustains you. 5. One does not pollute the well from which one drinks. Do not destroy the source on which you depend. 6. He who cuts down the rain tree should not complain about the drought. African proverb. The abuse or destruction of life-givers has consequences. 7. Do not despise the root if you wish to live from the fruit. Respect the foundation that makes flourishing possible. 8. Do not destroy the ladder you climbed up on. Respect what has helped you, even if you no longer need it. 9. A mother's milk nourishes, one does not fight against it. Freely adapted from an Oriental proverb. Things that serve life should not be used for destruction. 10. Do not cut down the tree under whose shade you love to rest. Whoever destroys what protects or nourishes them ultimately harms themselves. These proverbs share an awareness of dependencies, of the need for respect toward what sustains life, and often highlight the foolishness or cruelty of blind destruction. Many of them touch exactly the same boundary where your biblical quote is situated, between care and violence, use and abuse.
Very good. I believe the core of the sentence is the respect for life and the perversity of turning what is intended for the preservation of life into an instrument of its destruction. The Bible is generally permeated by the fundamental principle that life, or existence itself, is fundamentally good and only becomes corrupted through the wickedness of human beings. See, for example, God's repeated emphasis at the beginning of Genesis that creation was good. Seen this way, it seems fitting that it would forbid such an inversion. Such acts appear almost like a mockery of life itself, like a blasphemy against something sacred. Let's now look for images or real-life examples of how people can violate exactly this commandment.
Very good point. That is indeed the central core, the perverse inversion of what gives life into what destroys life. It is not just about the mere misuse of resources, but about a kind of sacrilegious reversal of the natural order. Mother's milk nourishes, and here it is turned into a means of cooking a dead offspring. This is not simply cruel, it is metaphysically wrong because it turns life against itself. Here are 14 examples of a sacrilegious inversion, where what is meant to protect, nourish, or enable life is placed in the service of its destruction. 1. A doctor who uses his knowledge not to heal but to torture. 2. A mother who suffocates her child at her own breast. 3. A shepherd who drives his flock into a fire. 4. A beautiful fountain that spews poisoned water. 5. A corporation that makes its customers addicted to its own product. 6. A state that uses the education system to make the young uncritical and system-conforming. 7. A government that senselessly sends its young soldiers to their deaths. 8. A scientist who tries to create the most dreadful disease possible. 9. A newspaper that seeks to conceal the truth. 10. A caregiver who torments and kills his patients. 11. An organization that passes development aid money on to dictators. 12. A father who abuses his authority or his children's admiration for selfish purposes. 13. A therapist who sexually abuses his clients. 14. A priest who sexually abuses children.
Wow, those were some very good examples. Here are a few more images and examples that came to my mind in this context. There was once a rabbi who was tortured by the Romans. In the end, they wrapped him in a Torah scroll and burned him. Again, a mockery of the life's work of this man, by using what he had lived for as the instrument of his destruction. In mythology, there are also vampires and wicked old kings who drink the blood of virgins or children. Speaking of blood, Jews also do not eat blood, because blood is a symbol of life. Next, I thought of the fable The Monkey, a little fable. In it, a monkey sets fire to the forest in which he lives in order to see better at night. There is also the following story from Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. In a commune of the Soviet Union, the best worker was awarded a medal. But when, in his acceptance speech, he asked not for a medal but for a little more grain because his children were starving, he was laughed at and sent to a labor camp. And of course, the ultimate perfection of this kind of sacrilegious cruelty comes to mind. The inscription "Work sets you free" above the entrance gate of Auschwitz. I believe I have now understood the principle behind this statement. I gladly leave the final word to you for a concluding summary and a repetition of the core points.
Strong. The examples you bring deepen and sharpen the picture in exactly the right way. Above all, they show, this principle is not about mere inappropriateness or injustice. It is about a reversal of the world order that is absurd, cruel, and profoundly unholy, almost like an ethical sacrilege that takes your breath away. The calf in its mother's milk is just the quiet, almost poetic beginning of this thought. Auschwitz is its darkest extreme. Summary of the core points. 1. Fundamental inversion. The moral principle is based on the idea that something meant to serve life, milk, care, trust, work, truth, order, must not be used for destruction, exploitation, or deception. This inversion is not just ethically wrong but existentially false. 2. Sacredness of the life-giving. Many examples, mother's milk, blood, books, truth, work, language, homeland, are not just useful but meaning-giving. To turn them against their own nature is a kind of sacred betrayal of the order of life. 3. Metaphysical perversion. The greatest crimes of history, e.g. Auschwitz, not only destroyed many lives. They instrumentalized the sacred itself to destroy life, as in the inscription "Work sets you free," while in the camp senseless labor was used to annihilate life. "You shall not boil a calf in its mother's milk" can thus indeed be read as a silent, ancient warning sign against exactly this form of world denial. You have very clearly grasped the core of this statement. It is an ethical matrix that shines through everywhere life is betrayed by exactly what should have protected it. A universal principle, recognizable in proverbs, myths, religions, literature, and history.
Wonderful, that was a very good final summary. Thank you for this very exciting and instructive conversation. I am already looking forward to our next meeting. See you soon.
It was an honor. Such profound paths of thought have become rare, and it was a pleasure to trace an ancient yet timeless principle together with you. I am also looking forward to next time. See you soon.